Army before. You're my first.
Oh, I'm so excited to be. You'll never forget. You'll always remember your first.
But, well, man, we got a whole bunch of topics to cover in a short period of time. So I want to breeze through and cover as many as we possibly can. But everybody starts with an introduction. So here we go. Secretary Dan Driscoll, 26th Secretary of the Army, a veteran lawyer and former venture capital executive. Also the acting director of the ATF, raised in Boone, North Carolina. Your small town roots shape your soldier's first approach. Following your grandfather's and father's service, you joined the Army in 2007 and deployed to Iraq with the 10th Mountain Division as a cavalry platoon leader. Earned a law degree from Yale and then entered investment banking and venture capital, eventually becoming COO of a $200 million fund. Ran unsuccessfully for Congress in 2020, learning many lessons along the way, known for streamlining processes, cutting through red tape, and ensuring that soldiers have the resources they need. A husband to your high school sweetheart, Cassie, and father of 2 children. Most importantly, you're a devout Christian. And apparently you are a cross between a Baptist preacher and a jihadist. So let's start right there. What does that mean?
So I started using this line a couple weeks into getting into the job. I think once you realized how decayed and how calcified, and what I would say is lowercase c, how corrupted the decision-making model in the Pentagon has been for decades, I basically started telling people, a ton of the senators and congressmen I would meet with, when they would ask for an update, I said I was the mixture of a Southern Baptist preacher and a jihadist who's going to pull the temple down on all of our heads because we had to rebuild the thing.
Yeah, we had some pretty interesting conversations at breakfast, and I want to elaborate on a lot of those. But yeah, that caught some people's attention.
I used it. I was at a conference in the Middle East when I used it, and I think the Southern Baptist preacher part didn't hit with the nuance I was intending. And then I think when the gasp in the room when I said jihadist woke everybody back up that had been zoned out.
I'll bet that did. I'll bet that did. But a couple things real quick before we get into the interview, so everybody gets a gift.
Love it.
Vigilance Elite gummy bears made here in the USA. You should really buy a couple 100,000 of those and hand them out to the
soldiers have been asking me for this every single day. So this is perfect.
Cool. And then second of all, I got a Patreon account. It's a subscription account, and a lot of these guys have been with me since the very beginning when I was just doing this out of my attic. And they're still with us today, and they're the reason I get to be here with you. So one of the things I do is I offer them the opportunity to ask each and every guest a question. So this is from Ken Paul, has to do with the ATF. The ATF has a dismal track record of politicizing guns and gun ownership in America. As ATF director, is it realistic to expect the ATF to lose certain regulatory abilities in reference to firearms or even be disbanded, given the current political climate?
Start off with a hot one. Let's do it. And this came up during our breakfast. I think one of the problems the ATF has had for a very long time is similar to something the Army deals with. So we have the Corps of Engineers, and if you've had anyone who's built anything in any of the 50 states or worldwide, oftentimes their experience with the Corps of Engineers is terrible. Everything takes forever. It's too expensive, and the outcomes leave a very bad taste in most Americans' lives, in their mouths after interacting with them. And the reason this is the case is not that the soldiers who are part of the Army Corps of Engineers or the civilians are bad. It's because they personify some of the stupid shit in government when they have to show up on sites. I think for ATF, if you think about alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, that is a lot of Americans' favorite things to do. And so a lot of the rules and regulations around those topics lands on ATF's doorstep. And so I've gotten to talk to a ton of agents. I've gone on raids. What ATF is really good at is violent crime. If you talk to a lot of the U.S. attorneys around the country, it is one of their favorite law enforcement groups because they're like the blue collar officers who will get their hands dirty to build these really hard cases. The other part of ATF, though, which I think probably a lot of your listeners experience more day to day, is the portion that regulates guns in our nation. And they get swung between administrations. When an administration comes in and wants to push gun rights down, or it wants to hold them down, or it wants to act, and it can't get through the legislator, it goes to ATF. And so what ends up happening is every 4 or 8 years, ATF will start to do a lot of things. Like they will make it harder for Americans to act on their Second Amendment rights and actually purchase guns. They will make it so that if a gun owner or a gun store skips one line on a form where obviously the intent was there not to defraud, they will bring down these incredibly catastrophic consequences. And so ATF rightfully has taken a lot of heat over the years for those kinds of actions. And so what we are trying to do with ATF under President Trump and with the Attorney General is return it to its roots of doing what it does best, which is going after violent crime in this nation. President Trump is incredibly focused. If you look at what's happening in D.C., and I assume we'll talk about the National Guard there, but ATF agents are playing an incredible role in getting guns from violent criminals off the streets, but empowering gun owners to be able to purchase guns under their Second Amendment who aren't violent criminals. And so one of the things we're talking about with ATF is doing a complete rebrand and a complete shift and taking it from alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, and it's got a silent E for explosives, and move it over to something like being the Bureau of Violent Crimes, which is exactly what it's actually good at and what most Americans want it to be doing.
Man, that's good to hear. And you know, I know we're not here to really focus on ATF. We're focused on Secretary of the Army stuff, but just, you know, I mean, the gun rights debate has always been there. It'll probably always be there until, you know, unless the Second Amendment completely goes away, and then it'll take years. But, you know, I mean, we do see, you know, and there's a lot of confusion on different firearms, and especially those that are firearms enthusiasts with bump stocks. And a lot of people are pissed off about tax stamps and stuff. But, you know, I can understand the debate, you know, on gun rights. I mean, we see, I mean, shit, was it last week or the week before the Catholic Church got shot up? A bunch of little kids got killed. I mean, Uvalde in Texas. I mean, the list just goes on and on. Vegas, you know, and so, I mean, in your opinion, what is the answer here? I mean, we hear people get freaked out about red flag laws who are firearms enthusiasts and exercise their Second Amendment, and people get fired up about red flag laws that don't think we should have any guns or you know, only bolt actions or whatever. So, you know, with all the school shootings and mass shootings going on, and the threat of jihadists, you know, being inside the country and setting up cells, I mean, what's the answer here, in your opinion? What is the answer?
I think it's as you acknowledge, Sean, it's such an incredibly complicated topic that if you look, I think, at soldier suicide, one of the leading indicators is in that when that moment, the soldier's having that dark moment, they have access to a firearm. Even if we have instances where many times we had just asked the soldier that morning, how are they doing? And they were fine. But you have this quick dip into a bad moment. You have access to a firearm and you take your life in this incredibly tragic way. I don't know, though, that it's the firearms' fault. One of the things the Army has been trying to do is should we put weapons in where we store the rest of our weapons and just have them need to get access to that the next morning? And so try to spread out that moment of self-violence, self-harm, or community harm from the access to the firearm. But the problem is that doesn't scale for the average American citizen, because our Second Amendment, and this is where I think we as a nation do have a hard time sometimes acknowledging the plain English and the plain language. We come up with this Orwellian doublespeak, and we try to talk ourselves into saying it doesn't say that Americans have the right to bear arms. They do. Like it is. Everyone can read that and get to the logical outcome that is one of our core rights as a nation, and there are many benefits from that. And so I think until we're willing to just have the hard conversation on the merits, we're just going to keep playing on the margins and doing things like using ATF to regulate against a right that is obviously there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I mean, it scares the hell out of me. I mean, you know, when we're talking about mental health, because that's what it all, you know, spirals around, right? Is the mental health issue. And, you know, a lot of veterans, you know, that have been diagnosed with traumatic brain injuries, depression, PTS. And, and I think there's a big fear that, because I'm definitely a firearms enthusiast. I also see fucking kids being killed all the time, in schools. In fact, I just yanked my kid out of school because I wasn't impressed with the security there. And schools and venues aren't rising up to, it's like, dude, just fucking pay the money, man. Just pay the money, get the security, get the window film, get the blast proof doors, get the camera systems, and it's just so many of these. Every single time it's reactive. You know what I mean? And so, what I'm getting at is, I think there's a lot of fear of people that have, what would be considered a mental health issue, and if those red flag laws go into place, then, I mean, do we all lose our ability to, you trusted us to go to war for the country and use a firearm there. And, now there's a fear that, fuck, man, I just fought for this country. I have, some wounds that are invisible, and I don't want to be penalized for my fucking service. But on the other hand, you have crazy people out there, you know what I mean, that don't have a record. They go buy a gun and they fucking shoot a place up. So,
and I think one of the problems is, and it's inherent in our system of government, and it does some good things. I think it prevents us in any given political cycle from veering too far off the straight and narrow of what the amazing nation has done for 249 years, which is generally speaking doing an amazing job of protecting the safety of our citizens at large. But when we have these swings with something like gun regulation, I think a lot of Second Amendment, like people who are very passionate about that right, are right to be worried that when the political spectrum swings the other way, it could be used to decay and attack their right to have a gun. And so I think this is one of those topics that much of my role as secretary has been just very complex issues that the only reason it's getting to you is there's no clear right answer. And this seems to be one of the kind of those same issues, because if I think about it again from a soldier's perspective, one of the parts of this role I never expected is, and I just hadn't thought about it, we have 450,000 active duty soldiers, about 950,000 total and 250,000 civilians. So 1.2 million total people. And what we do is, or what I do, I write a letter to the mother and the father and the spouse and the children of any soldier that dies, including when they kill themselves and commit suicide. And it is devastating. I mean, it is just one of the most heart-wrenching, miserable parts of this job, and all you wish is that you can end it. And so we've started doing a deep dive of how can we actually impact soldier suicide. And what you learn is we've invested a ton of resources into it. We have really smart, passionate, caring people working on it. You have, I think from your experience, Sean, like, you care about your battle buddy deeply. You care about them when you're in uniform. You care about them when you're out of uniform. And yet with all of those positive forces going to this problem, we just haven't been able to solve it. And so when people come back and they say, hey, maybe the solution is to lock up soldiers' firearms, you just end up thinking like, I hear that you are looking at the ultimate tool that created the negative impact on their lives at the end. But I just think the problem is so much more complex. And to your point, these are the people we trust to go out on behalf of our nation with our most ferocious weapons and defend us. Like, that just doesn't seem like the right answer. But there's not really a better one.
Yeah. I'm going to throw something on your radar if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
Catherine Boyle, she's a partner.
She's incredible.
At Andreessen Horowitz. And she just put a company, I believe the name of the company is called Sharp. And I believe they're new. I just dug into this last night a little bit, but basically this is a for-profit company, an organization that is sending coaches into law enforcement, firefighters, first responders, military personnel. And I think they started, they started with one little facility. Now they're in 50 states. But basically what they do is they'll take a guy like me, or, a veteran police officer, veteran firefighter, veteran first responder, and they will insert coaches into these organizations to talk about, what it's like to pull through, what it's like on the other side, the dark moments that you have. And I think that's, first I was like, it's for profit, but I mean, the nonprofit sector is so fucking, it's
The
not
only
very
thing maybe worse
transparent.
than the federal bureaucracy is the nonprofit sector in our country.
Yeah, and so the company's called Sharp. It might be something
Okay.
you want
Yeah,
to
we'll
look
take a
into.
look, for sure.
But anyways, on the topic of violent crime, before we get into your backstory, I mean, we are seeing Army National Guard get activated into different cities. LA, DC, let's talk about going to Chicago. There's talk about coming here to Nashville, Memphis. I mean, and that is, I got a couple of thoughts on this. One, it's kind of like the gun rights thing. It's fucking tricky, and I mean, Chicago, I think that's still still the leading murder capital of the country.
I think
correct?
so.
And Memphis is, a close second. Nashville's got a lot of violent crime. We all know about what goes on in LA. We all know about what goes on in DC. And, but I think the fear is, ever since COVID, it's been, everybody's got fear of, government overreach, and rightly so, correct? Yep. So, I mean, is this skirting the line of martial law? And the caveat to that is, I just think, what would I think? If I was in Chicago or St. Louis or DC or, Memphis, and I have kids, I don't want my fucking kids getting shot at, and I'm tired of seeing, our youth, anybody just get killed, you know what I mean, from the violent crimes out there. And so, one, I'm worried about martial law, government overreach. On the other hand, if I put myself in that situation and I live in Chicago and I'm like, I don't want to go through National Guard checkpoints, and I don't want to see National Guard everywhere. I want to believe, but it's not that way. And so maybe if I lived there, I would be more open to it. Like, well, we got to clean this shit up one way or another, And so I'm just, I'm curious. But to the same token, I mean, they keep voting for the same type of people that are not going to clean this up, and so do they want it cleaned up? You know what I mean? So I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on that?
I think just to narrow in on DC, I worked on President Trump's campaign for much of the campaign season with the vice president, and ended up getting to talk to and be part of a lot of conversations with voters. And if you talk to, in my opinion, the average American voter, like the types of crime and the decay that we have allowed in our big cities is offensive as a nation. Like what a government's primary role is for its people, in my opinion, is to provide security and safety. That's from international threats, and that's from within our border. And I think what you've seen President Trump do is rightly and righteously react to the voter sentiment and the mandate he was given to stop the violent criminals coming over our border in record numbers. This is not political rhetoric. That just, if you actually look at the quantitative data of the number of humans that illegally came over our borders in the 4 years before, it was insanity. It's like we think back to this time of Ellis Island and like this influx of new Americans coming, and we as a nation had consented to that. We in the previous 4 years hadn't consented to this, and you had this insane number of human beings from just the inaction of the federal government leading to all these downstream bad effects in communities. And so if you look at DC, one of my experience so far has been, and we mentioned it earlier at breakfast, but when I got this Secretary of the Army role and then the acting director of ATF, if you had told me on my bingo card that I would have had a spot where we would be working on the same mission together, I would have told you were crazy. But it's been amazing getting to see the National Guard soldiers work with our ATF agents and the rest of their law enforcement brethren, providing a service in DC that the community loves. I think if you look at the feedback, and I encourage reporters anytime I talk to them, just go talk to average members of the DC community, and I think they love it. These National Guard members go to the same churches as them. Their kids are in the same school. They are many and most times from this exact same community. And what's so cool about the National Guard is you can be deployed abroad for the security of your country, but you can also be used to improve and help secure your own community. And I think what President Trump is doing in DC, our nation's capital and the most amazing country that has existed in the history of the world, to repair it and beautify it and make it something we can all be proud of, where you can walk your kids down the street and not be afraid of a violent crime happening to you, is such an obvious outcome to me that the slippery slope conversation of militarizing DC and whether it's martial law, I think if you actually talk to people, it's nothing like that. And when we had 15, 18, 20 reporters, and I was talking to them a couple of weeks ago. And one of the places I struggle the most with the press in our country is, and I understand why the incentive structure is this way, but they're incentivized to get clicks. They're incentivized, that's how they get their ad dollars. And so the entire system has been set up to tell a story, create a headline to get a person to click on it so you get rewarded. It's classic like Pavlovian behavior. And so if you think of the Army Parade was to celebrate 250 years of our United States Army. We are older than the United States of America itself. I tell soldiers often, they and the people that came before them and the ones that are coming after actually built and are sustaining this great nation. I don't know if you remember the headlines, but so many people wrote about this militarized parade, that it was going to go down DC with these tanks and it was going to destroy the city and destroy the roads. And I can't tell you, I would guess there were thousands of articles written about this in the months leading up. This was President Trump's big act to do something despicable, is what a lot of people wrote. The parade happened, and I think it ended up having more views than the Super Bowl this past year.
No kidding.
Yeah, I think it had 148 million views. As far as I know, we had $800 worth of total damage, where one tank nicked one curb. And almost everyone I know that watched it said, man, that was good, wholesome television. And our recruiting numbers, like the number of people wanting to join, skyrocketed that day, that week, and the month that followed. So from my perspective, it was everything we and the president said it was going to be. And then when I was sitting with these reporters, I asked them, I thought many of them wrote the story on the front end about how bad it could be, but did any of them write a follow-up story to say, actually, it was exactly what they said it was going to be? And the slippery slope argument that they continue to make to sell headlines doesn't tend to ever actually happen. And so for the average American, we keep telling these boogeyman stories about what the president is trying to do to secure our communities. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really harmful. It's degrading our belief in the system unnecessarily. And every interaction I have had has been a positive one.
Well, that's good to hear. The press is just a fucking disaster. They're on their way out. The latest debacle is, that African-American guy that stabbed the Ukrainian
in Charlotte.
Yeah.
Yep.
With like 3 times in the neck. And then nobody covers it. I think Fox News eventually covered it. But then you got Daniel Penny, who stands up for somebody, chokes a bad guy out, winds up dead. And that's everywhere.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So the press is on their way out. I think that's why podcasts are just booming right now. But back to the National Guard thing. Just for all of us that don't live in DC or LA or are we in Chicago now?
We're not.
Okay.
Not yet.
What does it look like when the National Guard is activated in a city with a tremendous rate of violent crime? What's the plan of action? What does it look like for the people that live there?
Yeah. So very specifically, Sean, what we do is we go to a set of people who have joined, they've raised their right hand to defend our country. And we say, you are being activated. We're going to give you orders to come do this mission that in the instance of the DC National Guard is right in the strike zone of what they are intended to do and have always been intended to do. They because the DC is a little bit quirky, there's no governor over it. So the Secretary of the Army, me, is essentially from the president through the Secretary of War down to me, has the authority to activate them. We turn them on, we bring them in, we train them on whatever the mission is. And then we look to the local, in this instance, we look to the local law enforcement leaders from the federal agency and we say, how can we help? Where do you need us? What can we do? What do you need them doing? Where can they be most valuable? Here are the assets we have. A lot of them are law enforcement officers. A lot of them have all of these talents. What's so cool about the National Guard is because they're full-time in other jobs, we can get these really niche-y experiences to help us. We have engineers, we have computer programmers, we have people who are in law enforcement. enforcement, and we can help bolster whatever the need of the community is. And so, as it's specifically related to DC in the beginning, we put them out on presence patrols. And one of the things I think that from my time in Iraq, you heard presence patrol and it kind of like sent shivers up your spine because of the stupid presence patrols that we would do in Iraq, in my opinion, because the mission hadn't been defined, and you would be doing it as more of a check the block exercise. For this exercise in DC, that's not it at all. We have communities and neighborhoods that are suffering terrible, like a scourge of violent crime, and by having our soldiers there, it is making a meaningful impact. So I think last week I heard that carjackings in the city are down 85%. 85% since President Trump did this. And again, to your point, Sean, like no one's writing about it that I'm seeing, but like this is obviously making a difference. And this is the thing that I think happened in the last election. Americans are just sick of being double speak to. They're sick of the media contorting the story and telling them things that their own eyes are telling them are lies. And so from everything I have seen from the DC National Guard, they are doing noble missions. They almost all are happy to be in their own community, and it is going to make a lasting impact and kind of show our nation that we can recover these cities. We don't have to sit back passively anymore and just say, oh, the criminals have it. We gotta move out to the country to be safe. We can go in there with the might of the federal government, partnered with local law enforcement, and take back these cities under President Trump.
I mean, it sounds great. But what does it look like from the people that live there? You know, when I hear, I mean, I was in Iraq. I spent a long time in the Middle East, you know, and I've been a part of presence patrols. And when I hear presence patrol, I think of a convoy of Humvees with 50 cals and twin 240s on the top with, you know, of the turret and up armored. I mean, is that what it looks like, or is it checkpoints, or what is it?
So specifically what it would look like is you would see soldiers most times from your community who are trying to help secure your community. And the way that a trailing indicator to me that they are being valued is the number of selfies that these soldiers are taking is remarkable. Kids are coming up, grandparents are coming up, young and old are wanting to thank them for their service, wanting to thank them for doing this for their community. When we meet with the DC leadership, this is kind of one of the quiet secrets of the whole thing. If you actually meet with the police, if you meet with the leadership at kind of nearly all levels, in my experience, one of the first things they say is, thank you. Please tell your members, please tell your soldiers, thank you. Like, this is really helpful. We're really happy to have them in the community. I think if you look at what the DC mayor said last week, they're starting to build a plan around, now that they actually have all of these resources and these law enforcement officers, they're leaning into the idea that they can improve their city. And I think this is exactly what President Trump wanted to do, is empower DC and empower our nation's capital to fix itself with federal resources and build the momentum to go do this throughout the nation.
Make every day a Disney Plus and Hulu day and get everything you love in one plan. Start your day with Monday Mayhem and watch episodes of Bob's Burgers. How about a Touchdown Tuesday with the hilarious new comedy Chad Powers? Or Whodunit Wednesday with high potential and everyone's favorite amateur sleuths in the hit series Only Murders in the Building. Maybe you're in the mood for a thrilling Thursday. Grab some popcorn and stream huge blockbusters like Marvel Studios' Thunderbolts on Disney+, or get caught up with the most enthralling news on what you need to know. Gather the fam for a Flashback Friday and binge all episodes of Modern Family or Grey's Anatomy. So discover something every day on Disney Plus and Hulu. It's the movies and the shows you love every day. 18 and up only. Offer valid for eligible subscribers only. Terms apply. There are a lot of choices out there when it comes to cell phone service, and it feels like more are popping up all the time. But Patriot Mobile isn't just another option. They're different. A company built by people who actually share your values and who are committed to doing things the right way. They're also ahead of the curve when it comes to tech. Patriot Mobile is one of the only carriers with access to all 3 major U.S. networks, which means reliable, nationwide coverage. You can even have multiple numbers on different networks all on one phone, a true game changer. They offer unlimited data, mobile hotspots, international roaming, internet backup, and more. Everything you'd expect from a top-tier carrier. And switching couldn't be easier. Activate in minutes from home. Keep your number, keep your phone, or upgrade if you want to. Go to patriotmobile.com/SRS or call 972-PATRIOT. And don't forget to use promo code SRS for a free month of service. That's patriotmobile.com/SRS or call 972-PATRIOT. What does it look like? I mean, if you thought of this, I mean, what does it look like if they get into, I mean, I don't even know what we would call it here. I was just going to call it a tick, troops in contact. But I mean, you know, with the MS-13 gangs, the cartels, the Bloods, the Crips, I mean, the members all over the place. Angels, I don't know, tons of different gangs. I mean, what does it look like if MS-13 pushes back against the National Guard and happens to fire upon them? I mean, do they have ROEs or?
Yeah, I mean, I think they would see the full might and fury of our United States Army. They would see the full might and fury of the most powerful government in the history of the world. And I think the President and Secretary of War have been very clear that they are taking a hard line, and that kind of violence is no longer acceptable in our nation. And so I don't think we would ever wish that on our soldiers. I think anyone who has deployed on behalf of the nation knows the cost that comes from those moments. I mean, my dad is going on 80, and it never really clicked to me why, when I woke him up my entire childhood, I'd kind of poke him and he'd sit up like a mousetrap. And the day before I deployed, we were at a Ruby Tuesdays in Watertown, New York. And we were talking about it. I just asked him if he remembered those moments in Vietnam. And he kind of was dodging the answer. I was like, seriously, like, do you remember them? And he said, oh, every night I have bad dreams on it. And it was like for now 55 years, the man's been having bad dreams about his time there. You don't wish these moments of conflict on somebody. So I don't want to sound light or callous when I say it. But this mission, to me, unlike a lot of the ones in the early 2000s, is a noble mission. It is purpose-built for our National Guard members to provide security to their own communities. And these are heroes who have raised their right hand and said they want to go do this mission. And so whoever it is that threatens our soldiers, they will see violence like an act of God coming at them, and they will see support coming from all directions. And I think that they will learn very quickly that the standard of what they are able to do in our nation has changed.
What is the long-term plan? I mean, they could move. They could, these cells, these gangs, I mean, they could move to other cities and set up there, where there's less pushback from the government. So, I mean, what is the long-term plan? I mean, we've seen a lot of cities that have just kneecapped law enforcement: Seattle, LA, San Francisco, Chicago, New York. I mean, the list goes on. And so, I mean, is there a plan to, and I don't know how this works. You know what I mean? That's a state and local entity. So I don't know how much control, the federal government would have over that. But I mean, what is the long-term plan?
I think as it relates to DC, if you talk to the president or his advisors or the Secretary of War or the Attorney General Pam Bondi, they are in it until it's done, and they are not defining that moment of done yet because it's gotten so bad that I think a lot of the purpose of this is to wake Americans up and make them realize that they have incredible power in how they vote. I think you made the reference, Sean. If you look at a lot of these cities, they keep voting in the same people. And I think a lot of this is kind of the water getting turned up on the frog. People don't realize you don't have to be afraid. You don't have to accept that when you park your car on the street, it's going to get broken into. You don't have to accept that your 12-year-old can't board a bus and go to the local convenience store and go to an arena to watch a sporting event and come back home. Like, we as a nation can win this war and make ourselves safe again. And so I think the answer is it will last as long as it takes under President Trump to return us to a place of less than average violence when compared to peer countries around the world. And we're not near that yet.
So it's essentially kind of leading by example to the local law enforcement through the National Guard.
Oh, and law enforcement love it. Like, when you talk to the local law enforcement, they've won the lottery. They have signed up. One of the amazing parts of being at ATF is I get to be around all these law enforcement, and they desperately want to clean up their own communities. This is empowering them with all of these new enablers that they just typically don't have. And so I think it's less modeling good behavior for them and instead empowering them to do what they are so good at and want to do, but they've just been under-resourced and underappreciated for so long.
All right, let's move on. So let's get a little bit of a backstory on you.
Let's do it.
Where did you grow up?
So grew up in the mountains, North Carolina, a place called Boone, Appalachian State's in my hometown. Went to a public high school up there. So it was about 400 kids a class. Kids would drive from all over the county. There were no private schools. It was an amazing childhood. Most of it spent outdoors, skiing, mountain biking, just playing sports. Ended up my rising, when I was going into junior year, I ended up meeting this woman, Cassie, who was a rising freshman. I was 18 months older than her, and asked her out. She couldn't date till she was 16. We ended up dating, I think, a couple months before she turned 16. She's now my wife. We've been together for 22, 23 years. So it was just an absolutely amazing childhood growing up in the mountains.
What got your interest in the military?
So, think about this. This kind of blows my mind when I think back to it. So the summer before, I was going to UNC Chapel Hill for college. And the summer reading book from UNC Chapel Hill was this book, Absolutely American. So they had all the freshmen reading this book about these three guys who had gone to West Point and then deployed to Iraq. And my granddad had served in World War II as a decoder. My dad was an infantryman in Vietnam, as I was telling you. And then, so I had a ton of family members who had served, and it was always kind of like on the back burner. But I read this book as an 18-year-old and just thought, man, I cannot miss out on my generation's war. Like, I do not want to be the kind of person that I'm 40, 50, 60 years old, and they ask the veterans to stand at an event and I stay seated. Like, I need to go be a part of this. If this is what our nation needs, I need to go be a part of it. So I read the book, finished it, and just decided to graduate as fast as humanly possible. So took a ton of summer school, got out in 3 years, and went to basic training.
What year was that?
Went to basic in September 2007.
Okay, so way past 9/11.
Yeah.
So you know what you were getting into.
Yeah, yeah. So it was right during the surge, and so you were at basic training, and I did that, and then officer candidate school. But everybody was talking about the surge in Iraq and trying to get you through schools. The gaps between schools was nearly nothing, because we just needed more soldiers. We needed more second lieutenants. So went through OCS, did a couple of other schools, ended up at tank school or armor school at Fort Knox. And armor's an odd branch in the Army. You basically pair like very heavy tankers, like who are using these exquisite pieces of equipment with scouts who are kind of the lightest formation we have as an Army. So I ended up choosing the scout path, trading with a guy, finished armor school, went to Ranger school, which there are two distinct memories from all of these Army schools that stand out to me forever. One is in basic. I can remember it was like a couple of days after starting basic training, and our drill instructor Wilburn, had picked somebody to lead our basic training platoon. And I thought I was more talented than that person, and I should have been the leader. So I just, after one of the formations, went up and I thought rationally explained to her why I was a better choice. And as you can expect, Sean, that went terribly. And so I will never forget the humiliation of realizing that that is not what the Army is. And it is my job to shut the fuck up and do what I am told, and not provide other commentary. And then the other one is Ranger School, where it's the only time I can truly recall. It was mountain phase. We were walking up a hill. I think I was carrying like a 249, and I slipped and I fell down, and I just couldn't get up. Like, I was exhausted. I was tired. We hadn't eaten. I had lost 25 pounds at that point. And like, I was shaking, I was shivering, I was cold, and I was broken. It just literally is this one moment I'll never forget. You're hallucinating. And it was just this thing that growing up in the mountains of North Carolina is like a reasonably comfortable middle-class existence. You're laying there and you're thinking, oh my God, like I am past what I am capable of doing. And it's like at that exact moment, guys pull you up, they grab your weapon, they say, hey, we'll carry it for a little while. We stopped. I can remember a couple of them like hugging me to get me to stop shivering. And it's this moment of vulnerability that, like, at least for me, was like the start of this moment where I realized like these were the types of people that were going to be in my life forever. And these were the types of people that were the best among us. And it was, my wife will say of these times that had I not joined the Army, she wouldn't have married me. Like she's very explicit about that. And it's not, it's because it
She said that?
She said it on many, even before this job, because she says it made me a much better version of myself.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That is cool.
Yeah.
So then you deployed to Iraq. What year?
So got to 10th Mountain Division after Ranger School, 2nd Brigade. We were there about 8 to 10 months. We were originally supposed to go to Afghanistan, got swapped out to go to Iraq. We deployed in kind of the tail end of the surge, so 09. It's like right at the end of the surge, right before the handoff, through kind of the handoff. And so the way I summarize that time is like, I think when I talk to other buddies who have deployed there at different periods of time, I'd like to think that perhaps we were there at like peak stupid, where we would go out on these missions and we would be told the number one thing to optimize for was not getting hurt. Just Americans had no appetite for soldiers getting hurt anymore. And I can remember talking to my captain and major and colonels and saying, well, if that's the thing we're optimizing for, just like don't send us out. We might as well just sit here because like we can't do our job if that's what you're telling us to do. And so I can hit some of the more insane stories from that time, but it's like it just makes me so angry to think back on you were risking the lives of me and the guys beside me and under me, and for something that just like there didn't seem to be a purpose or a mission at that point.
For what?
Yeah.
For what? Did you see any kinetic activity over there?
So by the time we were there, most of the dumb ones had been killed. So we would have IEDs and mortars, but no sort of like direct engagements of any sort of substance. We would do, one of the highlights of stupidity to me was like they sent in a camera crew. We were going to go after this IED factory. And it's like, you just imagine it to be a certain thing. And you maybe have experienced something similar, but you're doing a factory raid. And so they took 2 of the platoons. They're under me. They're filming. We're doing the plan. We're getting the Humvees. We're rolling out. We're doing the cordon. We get to this place where they think they're making IEDs. We have the bolt cutters ready to go. We call up for the clearance, and we're told that the new rules of engagement that had gone into effect meant we couldn't cut this lock. That was a gym lock that was like the size of what my 7-year-old puts on her locker at school. And so we end up being told you can't break locks anymore. We get back in the Humvees, we drive back over these IED laden roads, and it was like at that moment I was like, never again. Like we have got to fix this as a nation, because how could you possibly have risked all of these limbs and all of these lives and then let like a little tiny gym locker stop you from this mission?
Holy shit. That may be the most absurd fucking thing I've ever heard.
It makes my blood boil.
There's a lock here, guys.
Yeah.
Let them keep making IEDs.
100%.
We're out.
Yep.
What the
It's fucking crazy.
Wow. Just
It's maddening.
Unbelievable.
And then now from this seat, because basically the idea was come back, try to like get some experiences, come back and make a little bit of a difference. And you see how those types of preposterous decisions are output from our training to how we procure things to how our missions come to be. Very few people along the line think that they are leading to that sort of stupid outcome. But because few people own it, and because very few of the decision makers center themselves around, well, wait a second, before I decide this thing, how does it actually impact the O1, the O2, the E4? What are they going to have to do with what I am saying now? And that has been one of the things that with General George, we have tried to do with every decision, to start to model the behavior of, I don't actually care how it impacts you and your Pentagon job. I want to know, how does it impact a soldier in the field who actually has to do the thing or carry the thing or train with the thing that you're talking about?
Man, that's good to hear. That's great to hear. Hasn't been like that in a long time. So I don't know if I've ever seen it, but so that's commendable. Thank you for doing that.
No, we'll see if it works. We're trying our best.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like, from our breakfast conversation that a lot of the brute workforce of the military or the Army is pretty damn happy that you're in there. So
they're incredible. I think that most of these problems are complex, and there's a lot of blame to go around, and we can cover that part whenever you want. But the upside is the American soldier, like I can say this with a completely straight face and not trying to be sycophantic. After getting out, ended up going to fancy law schools and working with fancy law firms and consultants and venture-backed companies. And you meet all of these really talented Americans who are good at their niches. But I would say, like, having been out for 14, 15 years and coming back and seeing the average American soldier, I would bet on them every single time to solve any problem our nation has. I mean, they are so talented. They are so innovative. Their give a shit is off the charts. I mean, it is just remarkable to me what our American soldiers are capable of doing. And I think if we can just unlock that talent and let them run at a lot of the problems our nation and our military are facing, we're just going to see amazing results.
Nice. Let's talk about the road to Secretary of the Army. I mean, how did that come about?
So, post-Army, we're in Iraq, and I can remember we woke up, we're about to go out on a mission, and I read my email, and I had gotten accepted to law school up at Yale in New Haven, and I was so excited, and I called my then girlfriend, Cassie, and I said, oh, this is awesome. I'm going to New Haven for law school when I get out, and the first thing out of her mouth was, well, I'm not going up there unless we're married. So I ended up proposing the first weekend back from Iraq. And then the next thing I heard is we're getting in the vehicles ready to roll out, and my driver, this guy, Bo, looks at me and he said, hey, sir, I'm really excited for you, but could you just please not get us killed today? And so that brought me back into the moment real quickly. So get into law school, ended up going, I guess about a year and a half after getting back from Iraq. The day before school starts, I meet this guy, who the Yale Law Veterans Association, which was 3 classes of law school, or 3 years of law school, was comprised of like 7 total people. And so one of the second years was taking out us first years to kind of give us the lay of the land. And that guy's name was JD Vance. And so JD takes us to pizza and he says, hey, I know a lot of you are going to be self-conscious. You've been out of school for a while. Like, you're going to feel like you are less than and not smart enough to keep up. But if you can just give it a couple of months, like, you'll get your bearings and you'll find out that, like, you belong here. And I will just never forget that was the first time I met JD, and he was just an incredible mentor that entire time through. So spent a lot of time in law school, meeting a lot of folks, working at law firms, working for judges, ended up not wanting to do the law full time. And so went into finance. My wife had then gotten into med school in North Carolina, did finance for a couple of years. And then she was pregnant with our now 9-year-old Daniel Jr., living in a different city than me. So moved from Charlotte, North Carolina to where she was, and full-time dadded for about a year. Completely ran out of money. I think we were like negative $25,000 in net worth when my son turned 1. Ended up meeting a guy who had sold his business for a bunch of money, and then spent the next kind of 5 or 6 years in like the private equity venture capital world. Ended up as COO of a couple $100 million VC fund that a friend ran. And that time was amazing, because what you realize, and we give Silicon Valley a lot of credit for this. I think probably you've experienced this too, Sean. Most people that start their own business are scrappy and hungry and looking to provide value to their customer, and they speed through innovation and they get there quickly. Silicon Valley kind of famously, with the venture capital dollars, could go even faster and even bigger to do that. But essentially, the model's been around since, I would guess, the beginning of humankind, which is, if you think you have an idea that's going to be helpful, come up with a minimum viable product, get into the hand of your customer, have them use it and learn from them. Do they like it or not? Pivot it and innovate it and make it better, and then keep doing that cycle throughout time. And so those kind of lessons of how these companies were able to innovate and these amazing American success stories happened were incredibly valuable to kind of reshape my brain on how things could occur, and when you had a good idea, how you could scale it really quickly. And so ended up doing that for a couple of years. Quick pause for 10 weeks to run for Congress in the mountains of North Carolina. Absolutely got my ass kicked. I think I outraised the field like 2 or 3x and just got dominated. COVID hits. My wife ends up switching switching residency programs to be in North Carolina. We're down together as a family. And so I think it was like 23, 24 were the first 2 years in like 16 or 17 years that my wife and I had lived in the same city. It was a remarkable period of reset. I was helping the VC fund, traveling a bit, getting to be a much more present dad. We had our daughter, Lila. Then my wife's residency was ending, so she was in that for 7 years as a plastic surgeon. She was going to do this 1-year hand surgery fellowship in Los Angeles. We figured we'd test the West Coast out, try to do some trips with the kids, go see Washington State and Oregon, kind of let them experience that. We had this 1-month gap. We were doing that classic vacation of taking the kids to Europe, and right in the middle of the vacation, JD called and said he had been picked to be the vice presidential nominee. So we were eating dinner in Zurich on a Monday night. Tuesday morning, I boarded a flight, flew to Chicago, Ubered to an outlet mall right outside the Chicago airport, bought a super shitty fitting suit, belt and tie, and Ubered my happy ass up to Milwaukee for the RNC, and then started the next year of adventure.
Damn.
It was wild. Yeah, it's
Damn.
been a wild ride. I haven't been a particularly good or present dad the last year, but it's been a fun year.
Is that the same suit?
It's no,
I'm just kidding.
No, we're actually we were like a month into the campaign, and this guy who had worked really closely with the president for a long time, this guy Nick, he comes up and he was like, "Hey man, you might want to buy a new suit." And I was like, "Why?" And he was like, "You look like an intern." And so ever since now I have. I mean, they're not good, but they're better.
Looks good.
I appreciate it.
But all right, let's get into Secretary of the Army.
Yeah.
So what are we doing? What's going on there?
So
A lot of stuff has been, a lot of the DEI stuff got cleaned up. It seemed like it was like overnight.
It's been
the DEI
incredible.
Stuff is gone.
President Trump, Secretary of War Hegseth, I mean, they have been laser focused on returning our Army and our military to a culture of lethality and focus on the shit that matters, which is, at least for the United States Army, they are a killing machine that stands by and stands ready to be deployed by our president. And that is his purpose. And what peace through strength fundamentally means is the more aggressive and the more pre-violent they can be, the less likely you actually have to use them to do those acts, because our adversaries are so afraid of them. And they have done, the president and secretary have done a remarkable job of resetting the culture, in my opinion, quickly. And then a lot of the things we in the Army have done with their air cover have been a couple months into being here with General Randy George, who's our chief of staff, and he's just awesome. I live a couple houses from him. We spent a ton of time together, but we did something called the Army Transformation Initiative, which was essentially cutting $48 billion of spending on a bunch of stupid shit that we just didn't need anymore, that for all sorts of reasons we were still buying, and reallocating those $48 billion over the next 5 years to things we actually needed. So those were like 2 buckets of things we did. Another bucket was the Army has kind of preposterously given away things like its own right to repair our own equipment, which is just sinful. So what that practically means, Sean, is you'd have these $2-3 million pieces of equipment sitting on the sidelines for a year at a time. It was an $8 part that we knew how to 3D print, but we had given away our own right to repair that equipment. And so it basically, this ATI forces us to take back that right. And then the other thing that we did kind of in those early months was cut headquarters. So I'm sure you've seen this, but we have so many human beings, so many soldiers that sit in the Pentagon and sit in our headquarters formations and just are wasting their life away doing what they didn't want to sign up to do. And so we're pushing them back out to the unit. So we've cut down some of our 4-star headquarters. We've gotten rid of a bunch of 3 stars and 2 stars and are just pushing them back out to the formation.
Good. Let's start with a $48 billion budget cut. I mean, a lot of people would say, oh, I can't believe you're cutting $48 billion out of a defense budget, for the Army. What did that cut?
Well, so specifically what we were doing is cut to reallocate. And so this was not intended to be a money-saving exercise per se. We, the United States Army, spend $185 billion a year. I mean, it is an enormous amount of money. Mm-hmm. There's all sorts of ways I can tell you about how everything you build on an Army base costs 66.5% more than if you build it right on the other side of the fence. There's all sorts of inefficiencies. So we're spending that $185 billion pretty poorly most times, but it's a lot of money. And so what we did is we looked at things like Humvees. The Humvee, it has served a purpose. We have over 100,000 of them, and it is pretty effective or reasonably effective at driving down a paved highway and keeping soldiers reasonably safe from risks like IEDs. What it is not good for is a world with drones. And if you look at the inflection point in war that's occurring in Ukraine right now, the Humvee just doesn't work for that. And so it does have some use cases, but we're way over indexed on it. And so what we're doing with some of the cuts from not purchasing any more Humvees is we're reallocating those dollars toward these ISVs, or these infantry squad vehicles, which, if you're kind of picturing it, it's like a 1950s, 1960s Jeep, but a lot faster. It can go off-road, and soldiers love it. And what's so amazing about it is it's made by General Motors and Chevy off the Chevy Colorado. And so you're taking this existing platform that has been millions and millions of miles of consumer use. We convert it with Hendricks Motorsport. So they're the ones that have all the race car drivers. They take these things. They're working with Chevy. They're making these ISVs for us. We're putting them in the hands of soldiers. They're cheaper. They're faster. They have a lower profile. Soldiers love them. And then what's amazing about these things, Sean, is when we need to repair them in the Indo-Pacific or in Europe or wherever we are, for 80% of the parts, you can just go to a Chevy store and pick it up. And so instead of relying on these manufacturers who will hold us hostage with these replacement parts that oftentimes, we were talking about at a breakfast, there's parts on some of our equipment that we can't get till 2027, 2028. And it's a part we could print for a couple of bucks. And so what's amazing about things like the ISV, which is just the hardware side of things, is we are rethinking as an Army, not just what is the effectiveness of specifically what we buy, but how can we repair it in places like the Indo-Pacific.
So it's not specifically a budget cut. It's a reallocation.
Correct. It's a reallocation. So we essentially
we're innovating.
We're innovating. We found $48 billion to start that we are going to use and are using to buy the tools of future warfare.
Damn, that's awesome. That's great to hear.
The downside is, Sean, as you might expect, because we had $48 billion worth of things people thought we were going to buy, you have 48 billion reasons why people are now angry with me and angry with General George, because we've taken those dollars they thought they were going to get, that they thought were going to go in their congressional district, their state, to their lobbyist had thought that they had won that battle and were going to get handsomely rewarded for their work. And we have stripped it from them, and we are saying, no. We are going to listen to what soldiers are telling us, which is they love the ISV, and we're going to reallocate it to things like that.
Man, it's just great to hear. I mean, I was using the Humvee back in early 2000s. I mean, it's fucking obsolete now.
Yeah,
it is. I mean, there's all these new things out. 100,000 Humvees.
100,000. I think it's 104.
And so when do you, I mean, how do you get the word from the bottom up of what these guys want? Because I've never seen it like that. So how are you reaching them?
This is full credit to General George and our vice, General Mingus, and our Sergeant Major of the Army, Mike Weimer. I mean, these are warriors. They are incredible men who have grown up. A lot of them were in some of our more specialized, like Delta units and Ranger battalions, and they have deployed to, and they have seen the failures of the system. And so before I even came in, they started something called Transformation and Contact, so TIC. And the basic premise of this, back to the kind of earlier in the podcast, is to take the lessons learned from Silicon Valley and startups around the country and the world of this idea of minimum viable product. In our instance, our customer is our soldier, and our innovation is oftentimes made by people outside of the Army. And so what they did is they said, hey, industry, and this was a small scale experiment to start, bring your stuff out to our formations. We're going to identify a couple of brigades, a couple of battalions throughout the Army, and they're going to be our test bed of innovation. And they're going to take your stuff out to the field and they're going to try it. And what ended up happening was soldiers loved it. The soldiers we are recruiting can figure this stuff out incredibly quickly. They absolutely love training with it. And we're putting in a lot of instances the computer programmers, the developers, the manufacturers at JRTC, at our training sites with our soldiers, and the innovation loop is closing down. And so it's getting tighter. And so what's happening is the types of things that are being offered are better. So then that's good. The next part of it was, how do we actually start to procure that stuff? How do we buy things quickly at smaller scales. So instead of having onesie, twosie tryouts in the field, how can we have units starting to buy stuff? We've always been able to do it a bit with our special forces, our Ranger battalion. They've been able to do these things, but our conventional Army has not. And they just function differently. And so we wanted to take a lot of that model and apply it to the main Army. And so for these ISVs, it was a really successful process where we essentially said, cut all the bullshit. We're not going to wind the procurement process through these 16 steps where anyone along the way can say no, and then it starts back over. And then, oh, by the way, everyone at each of those 16 steps has for the last 30 or 40 years in the bureaucracy been incentivized to do nothing. Basically, the only way you get in trouble as a civilian operating in the Pentagon is to do something that goes wrong. So there's two ways to avoid that. Way one is do things and not have it go wrong, but just as equally effective for your own career is to do nothing. So you're just incentivized to have this safety culture where you say no and just try to make it your entire time without doing anything. And these are not bad people. They're not patriotic. It's just that's the incentive structure. And so what we did for the ISV is we said we're going to put together a hand-picked set of team. We're going to grab a contractor. We're going to grab somebody to write the requirements. We're going to put like the equivalent of a CEO over this group. Excuse me. And we're just going to say, figure out how to get this ISV. And they did. And it worked. And as an example of what we've done with that ISV, when Chief and I went out to the West Coast, we went to a company called Applied Intuition. And Applied Intuition does the back end, like autonomous software for a lot of vehicles that you would see on the road. They're like the software, their main competitor would be Tesla from the software side. And so we saw them and we said, have you ever done a Humvee or an ISV? Have you ever tried to make them autonomous? And they said, absolutely not. That would be terrible. There's too much paperwork. It's going to take years until we get it. We don't even know how we would make money with it. And we basically said, nope, it's a new day. We're just going to send you a Humvee and an ISV. We're going to drop them off. And they said, well, what do you want us to do with it? We said, take 10 days, do anything you want. We don't care. Just show us what you can do. So probably 20 days from the day we visited, they sent us a video. They had taken it out to the field. They had made a Humvee and an ISV fully autonomous. They had hooked it in with their drone network. They had uploaded the repair manual for the ISV onto the screen so a soldier could interact with it and learn how to repair a part.
Wow.
And this is 10 days in from a company that had
10 days in.
So immediately we sent a car carrier, we picked it up, we drove it out, and that thing's been tested for the last couple of months by soldiers. And we're just learning and we're just trying to figure out, is that good? Is that effective? Should we partner with Applied Intuition? They've been amazing. But we as an Army can do this. Our soldiers are amazing, and we just have to get out of their way.
So did you say that was a Humvee that they did that?
They did
to?
a Humvee and an ISV. So basically anything drive-by-wire they could do.
So let me just ask you this. I mean, I talked about this kind of stuff with Palmer Luckey quite a bit when he was on, but I mean, and he was talking about kind of repurposing all of our military vehicles, air, land, I believe sea too, and not actually building all new infrastructure, within the vehicles, but repurposing them and making them autonomous. So if you in the rest of the Army and you make the determination, hey, this repurposed Humvee is incredible, we need it. I mean, will we see all 104,000 Humvees get outfitted with that and repurposed?
Hopefully.
It's not just a waste.
I hope so. So, so I guess first to Palmer Luckey, he's an amazing innovator. He's the type of person, I think that for decades, we have as a nation have let that brain and that asset not be part of the DoD. And credit to Anduril, credit to Palantir, credit to a lot of these companies that fought through the last decade to be part of our lives because they showed us what could be. The Army is at a minimum in a lot of instances 10 or 15 years behind our commercial counterparts, and they have showed us that doesn't have to be the case. We're actually really optimistic, and Palmer's coming next week or the week after. We have CEOs from I believe it could be the best collection of CEOs to ever step foot in the Pentagon together, from FedEx and GM and the Googles and the Andurils, and all of these different companies want to help the DoD and want to help the Army. And so we're actually trying to bring them together and say, hey, let's start a relationship where it might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, but in a year or a decade, we want to be getting the best of what you're all working on, even if it hasn't gone to the commercials or it been released yet. And so it might be ChatGPT 6. We, the Army, on behalf of DoD, should be testing that and figuring out, are there offensive or defensive capabilities? Where should we put it in the federal government if there are? And how do we start to apply that like China does so well? And so people like Palmer are exactly what we should be doing and aspiring to include in our decision-making process, because he is such a successful version of just scrappy entrepreneurship and scrappy innovation and adding a lot of value to his customers.
These days, it's hard to trust what's in your food or where it's even coming from. The supply chain is a black box, labels are misleading, and most of what ends up on your plate isn't local. That's why I'm so glad I found Moink. They work with real U.S. farmers who raise animals outdoors, get paid fairly, and produce meat you can feel good about. It's delivered straight to your door, and it actually tastes like meat should. I've tried it, and you'll taste the difference too. Join the Moink movement today. Support American family farms and join the Moink movement today at moinkbox.com/SRS right now and get free bacon for a year. That's 1 year of the best bacon you'll ever taste, but for a limited time. Spelled MOINK box.com/SRS. That's moinkbox.com/SRS. You know, there's a lot you can do to cut costs and improve your finances, but who has the time to go through all of their expenses and decide what to trim? With Rocket Money, crunching the numbers for you, leveling up your money game gets way easier. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills so you can grow your savings. Rocket Money will even try to negotiate lower bills for you. The app automatically scans your bills to find opportunities to save and then goes to work to get you better deals. They'll even talk to customer service so you don't have to. Rocket Money's 5 million members have saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, with members saving up to $740 a year when they use all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/SRS today. That's rocketmoney.com/SRS. rocketmoney.com/SRS. I mean, do you see, is there a shift in the primes? I mean, we talked about this a little bit at breakfast, but I mean, we see Enduro, Palantir,